colonialism was a hell on earth.
The treatment was then very brutal, very brutal.
For 50 years, Kenyans have wandered in the wilderness.
I would have not been political if God was not political. If God was not called Lord, King.
He would not sleep at State House because he said there were ghosts.
This is how Kenya was under the British colonialists. After their invasion on this Eastern Africa land, the British Empire established the East Africa Protectorate in 1895. It was later to be known as the Kenya Colony by 1920. Under this, people suffered as the colonial discriminatory society took shape.
When the white people came to occupy, or the occupation, came, they decided to make the African a kind of a servant, that servant class. And anybody who asked for independence is shot.
Africans themselves were fighting for freedom. African Kenyans had that ambition. But it was also regarded by the Europeans, particularly the British settlers, as their future home. In fact, that was why Mau Mau struggle came.
People were being beaten because chiefs were told by Wasungus to chase us. So we were not free. We were just fighting. It was a fight.
Many Kenyans of different walks of life could not accept this, and they formed the anti-colonial movements. In 1942, members of the Kikuyu, Embu, Meru and Kamba tribes took an oath of unity and secrecy to fight for freedom from British rule. The Land Freedom Army movement, later to be named Mau Mau by the white colonialists, began with that oath, and Kenya embarked on its long, hard road to national sovereignty. From 1952 to 1959, the colonial governor announced a state of emergency to counter the Mau Mau activities.
People were prepared to sacrifice and suffer any pain to get out of it. And one could only look with admiration at the people who were big enough and who decided to give up everything just to fight for the freedom that we have. I will never forget them. I think these people, when they die, I'm sure their places are secure next to their God.
Police officer in the next door division, which was in another district, had lined 5 people up against the wall and shot them. I wrote a letter complaining about this to the district officer in Nyeri, and was informed that he had passed my letter to the district commissioner in Fort Hall. And that was the last I heard of it, and no one heard any more about that particular incident.
British troops at one time were paid a gratuity for every Mau Mau they killed, and they had to bring in the man's hand to prove that they had killed a man. And apart from British troops, the local settlers took the law in their own hands, formed themselves into groups with their guns and went out shooting people out of hand. This brought a tremendous reaction from the people as such. You may call it a revolution. Yes, it was in opposition to government's action.
Deliberately, I use the term hell because this is what life was under colonialism. People, I remember that in our home, which is not far from where we are, there were nightly searches or inspections. The police, the army, a combination of the police and the army came to our village every night looking for Mau Maus. And many times I saw my father beaten almost to death. Not far from here, one time we were coming from town with him, and a white man passed us and then stopped us. And then he asked my father to give him the hat he was wearing. And when he neared where he was, the white man got out of the car and gave him such a slap that actually it floored him.
Ilikuwa Oktoba 52, watu wote tulisikia Kenyatta ameshikwa. Hakushikwa Kenyatta peke yake, lakini alishikwa na mabingwa wa uhuru. Ilikuwa kilio nchini Kenya, watu wote tuliona huzuni mwingi sana.
With him were Bildad Kagia, Kungu Karumba, Fred Kubai, Paul Ngei and Achieng Oneko. They were known as the Kapenguria Six.
The reason for our arrest was not Mau Mau, but because they think we are going ahead uniting our people to demand our rights. The government arrested us simply because when they saw we could have an organization of 30,000 or 40,000 or more Africans demanding their rights here, they say, we've an excuse, Mau Mau.
The judge who was conducting this trial had retired, but he was brought in specially for this case. He was well known to be anti-African, and the irony of it is, after he passed judgment that morning, he had to leave the courthouse in an armored car and was not seen in Kenya again.
You, Jomo Kenyatta, stand convicted of managing Mau Mau and being a member of that society. You have protested that your object has always been to pursue constitutional methods on the way to self-government for the African people, and for the return of the land which you say belongs to the African people. I do not believe you.
And then in prison, they would send people to murder him. It is thought that, it is known that Chotara, a man called Chotara, who came out, who came into his prison, where he was brought in from prison to murder him, and he nearly succeeded. Now that kind of thing made him very sad.
Kenyatta was the head of the party, but I don't think he was directly involved as such. He knew what was happening, obviously, but it is Bildad Kagia and Fred Kubai, and even a man called Kungu Karumba. I also knew him as a businessman. He had a transport business, Kungu Karumba. I think those three were directly involved in the Mau Mau management.
In this struggle, Field Marshal Dedan Kimathi, himself a Mau Mau, was allegedly arrested and hanged by the British Army.
We thought that we had lost the battle with the capture of Dedan Kimathi, because he was the only outstanding person, the spokesman of the forest fighters. Now with his capture and his death, then that was the death of the revolution.
1957 saw the first direct elections for Africans to the Legislative Council, or LegCo. Those elected intensified their call for the release of Jomo Kenyatta.
Jomo Kenyatta is the father of the African nationalism and the African national movement in this country. We cannot in any sense be more advanced than our teacher and master, whom I think is much more advanced in political outlook in this country than we are. We are still just in the stages of learning politics from him.
And in 1962, Mzee Kenyatta and the Kapenguria Six were released. Jubilation filled the air in celebrations of the great man's release. In bitterness to the whites' humiliating ways, Mzee Kenyatta addressed those who had come to meet him.
I have spoken enough in this language. It is not my wish that I should be speaking to you in a foreign, and for that matter, in colonialistic language.
He told people that Africans could govern themselves, and he led them to govern themselves. With his leadership, which was 15, 16 years, he left the country governing itself.
We must show the world that some of them have been wrong, that some of them have misunderstood us, and it's only by our action they will know that we mean business.
Everything was done properly, from colonial to independence, self-government, and then independence, then the republic, all done very orderly, and there was no question that anything was done which one regrets today. Perhaps on hindsight, perhaps you should have been slower than it was, but people needed, as they do need today, they wanted to change again the constitution that we had at independence. They wanted to change it to the current constitution that we have, and which we are going to experiment and see whether it's going to work or not.
On 12 December 1963, Kenya became an independent state. The Union Jack of England was replaced by the black, white, red and green flag of the young nation. It was all jubilation at Jamhuri Gardens as more than 40,000 enthusiastic Kenyans sensed their first sense of freedom.
That night of independence, what they call Republic Day, that night it rains cats and dogs. But we are so happy that our cars could not move, and therefore we decided to go on foot from where the celebrations were held to State House to continue celebrations there.
Well, he would not sleep at State House because he said there were ghosts of white people that were that he felt the first night.
Like any other people in hell, we looked forward to going to heaven someday. And that was to be the day of independence. So the way we celebrated independence was the way people would celebrate if they were to die, knowing that death would take them to heaven.
Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, born Kamau Wangengi in Gatundu, Central Kenya, became the first Prime Minister of the last East African British colony. Kenya started its new journey in freedom. Mzee Kenyatta formed his first government and started on the road to the making of a nation. There were now two independence parties: the Kenya African National Union, KANU, and the Kenyan African Democratic Union, KADU. KADU had been formed in 1960 to defend the interests of the small tribes of Kalenjin, Maasai, Turkana and Samburu, or Kamatusa, against the dominance of the larger Luo and Kikuyu, the majority in KANU. KADU, led by Daniel Moi and Ronald Ngala, was advocating for Majimboism, or a devolved government which would be spread to all the regions, while KANU with Kenyatta, Odinga and others advocated for a unitary government. In 1964, the independence parties merged to form a unitary government. A cabinet was composed of all men, no women. Mzee Kenyatta was the president and Odinga the vice president. And just 3 years later, the men who had fought for the release of Mzee Kenyatta from detention for Kenya to form its first post-colonial government fell out with him.
The members of the dissident group claim that they have the support of the voters. We must now ask them to give the voter the chance to express their will.
There are 2 or 3 major reasons for my leaving him now. And that is, 1, the policies that we were supposed to pursue are not being implemented to the best interest of our people.
And the second reason?
The second reason is that the party has become very feeble indeed.
It is fairly clear that there is pressure and desire that I should leave the government. The authority concerned has, however, showed reluctance to say so openly to the public. If I thought that there was the slightest chance of putting things right from within the government, then this desire to remove me from office would not worry me, as indeed it has not done for the last 1 year. However, wananchi, my honest opinion is that the present government has reached a point of no return. It can only do for the people the little that the underground master allows it to do. Its guiding star has become personal gain. I therefore find it impossible to be part of it, and my decision is that from now on I should be free to join with wananchi in demanding that their voice be heard.
In 1969, Odinga and his lieutenants were detained and their party, the Kenya People's Union or KPU, was banned. This marked the start of political oppression which would continue. From then on, any person with views against the government, especially politicians, university students and lecturers, was detained without trial.
Detention is horrible because it goes for your body and it goes for your mind. And I remember the first time when I was taken to detention. Before I thought that people got detained in Maliral, in Lodwar, the same places where Kenyatta and his colleagues had been taken. Little did I know that a detention would be a prison within a prison until I was taken there. And then I saw, as I was being taken to my cell, I saw Achieng' Oneko, my hero. And when I saw him, before the police covered the small window to the cell, I had already seen that it is Oneko, and I knew, oh, finally I'm in detention.
Political assassinations have not been uncommon.
With assassinations, very unfortunate. People like Tom Mboya, Aguen Skodek, or J.M. Kariuki, or Pinto Gama Pinto, or even to the latest of the Mumbai. We really detest, and these are the histories that I tell you will only be forgiven, but not forgotten.
Assassinations denied Kenyans a chance of getting what might have been better leadership from these people. J.M. Kariuki is remembered for his famous saying that Kenya has become a nation of 10 millionaires and 10 million beggars. Though he was a member of government at some point, he believed in fighting for the rights of the people from within. This seems to have been futile.
These were assassinated because Mboya wanted to give us a democratic government. JM wanted to bring in a nationalistic government where people were all equal and where people could all involve in the development of the government. Let's say a government of the people. So these people had some good destiny, some good democratic destiny, but their ambitions were curtailed by people who actually looked to themselves. Around their area, with maybe some clique from around.
I must say, Kenya missed him. Kenya missed Tom Mboya. And because he was at the forefront of unity, he was a very educated politician and hard worker of the nation. I think we do miss him.
Having fought for independence, the Mau Mau were left with more scars, both physical and emotional. Some of them still remained in the forest even after their right-hand man had taken the helm of power.
And when he asked them to come out, many of them came out. It's only 6 who remained. 6 people, just 6 people remained. I know about that because I went to talk to them myself. That was a matter of, one, their leader was out, he was now leading. But I don't mean leader of the Mau Mau, leader of the Africans. They were Africans, whether they were soldiers or they fought, but they were Africans and they were Kenyans.
And years later, they sued the British government for compensation.
We are very, very happy with the ruling of the court in London today on our case. For a very long time now, we have remained steadfast in our pursuit for justice, for torture and that we suffered under the British government. With today's ruling, we are very happy that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Mzee Kenyatta was to rule Kenya for 15 years until 1978 when he died.
Very sad, like darkness had fallen on Kenya, and I was not alone. Everybody was sad because it was a sad occasion, losing the founding father of a nation to the peoples of Kenya. It was a very sad occasion.
We heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, we'll go home. Now you can imagine that sigh of relief coming from somebody who used to go 30 kilometers to go and listen to his hero. Now the demise of the hero means independence for the hero's victim.
I felt very downhearted that we are going to be without Jomo Kenyatta. Just going to miss him is going to be another world.
His presidency was loved and hated by many in equal measure.
In Parliament, there was an effort, there was an attempt by some people to come in without a tie. Just so he had to discuss with the speaker that he must be very strict. you wear a coat, a jacket, and a tie and trousers. But you know, this is something that has helped us, because otherwise, you know, people in Kenya are very, very casual, and you probably would have been seeing people walking in Parliament wearing vests or things like that. But I thank him for doing that.
Whether he walked Kenya the required number of steps in the right direction to avoid future bad blood among the people is another question.
Unfortunately, I would later realize that we had actually not gotten into the promised land. That for the leaders, they had entered Canaan, or they would enter Canaan very fast, soon after independence. For the majority of the people, including my parents, they continued to stay in the desert and to look for a Joshua that would finally take them to the promised land. Unfortunately, I think they are still on the journey today, 50 years down the line.
Not everyone reflects happily on our 50 years of political independence.
The 3 previous governments have left 3 seeds that they planted. The seed of tribalism, the seed of nepotism, the seed of corruption. Unless this, and especially the seed of tribalism, if you do not eradicate it,
the whole leadership of this country, we should offer something that the people of this country will not get if they were on their own. So if someone has a leadership in this under-civilized country and they still can't afford food, then we have no reason to exist.
We are finishing our 50 years, but when we are at the light end of the 50 years, we give to ourselves a new constitutional order to have a new beginning for this country. The issue is, are we ready to take that challenge?
We celebrate the 50 years. We must know that we have made some mistakes, which we must correct. We should stop and start going forwards. And the need is urgent. We've been too long in the desert. It's time for us to go to the promised land.
The half a century of self-rule can serve as a wake-up call to the people of Kenya.
Tushangilie Kenya, taifa letu tukufu, Kenya tunayoipenda, Kenya nchi tunayoipenda.
Twajivunia sana tukijiita wa Kenya, nchi yenye baraka, Kenya nchi yenye baraka.
Tumekomboa Kenya, taifa letu tukufu, tumebadili mwendo, tutalinda katiba mpya. Anayependa Kenya ni yule mwenye kutenda haki kwa watu wote.